Hello my little hatchlings, and welcome back to my series of redesign videos where I take my old characters from WSS and redesign them for a new story. But if you're new here, then welcome! If you don't know what WSS is, it's essentially my discontinued story I had on Webtoon. I suggest watching the video that explains why I had discontinued WSS linked just up in the right corner. So today I'll be going over Lucas Veron, or Lucas Veron now. And he frustrates me so fucking much. Before I go any further, let me just put up a quick and brief warning. Lucas and WSS had trauma that is very sensitive to talk about and contributes to why WSS Lucas had become a very frustrating character to write. And I had handled said trauma very poorly. Thankfully, I never got that far into WSS to explicitly show it, but still, I had handled it very poorly on my end. I want nothing more than to scream at myself and ask what the fuck was I thinking? That's a clueless 13-year-old for you. So in regards to Lucas's trauma, I'll be very vague about it whenever it's mentioned, hopefully not mention it at all. With that said, let me get back on track and actually start talking about Lucas. When Lucas, a human who exhibits albinism, was first created, he was meant to be more of the cheerful, happy-go-lucky sort of character, the joy to Callan's sadness, and eventually Noah's opposite, so to say. And it's this sort of dynamic that would shape Lucas's friendships and Lucas as a whole. However, what Lucas essentially became was the comedic relief. A poorly written one. He was happy and cheerful to the point it was cringy and annoying. He also had little to no self-preservation as a character, and I mean that in a bad way. The times this specific quality of his was shown off, if anything, was unnecessary, and it felt like Lucas had just put himself in danger just for the sake of it. Not to mention his outfit is absolutely horrid. It's literally just patchwork. There's just nothing else to say about it. It was clear from the beginning that WSS Lucas was in dire need of a makeover, but I had outright refused to do so for 5 years. I was not creative when it came to clothes when I was 13, let me tell you that. And let's just say I did Lucas dirty in both the character and wardrobe department, and he did not deserve it. So yes, Lucas, the failed, traumatized comedic relief who deserved much more than that. I guess one of the only redeeming qualities WSS Lucas had with his character was that he would put others before himself. Despite all the bad things he's been through, he found it in himself to defend those who couldn't defend themselves, even if it were to the risk of his own detriment. Does that count as a savior complex by any chance? Please tell me I'm wrong. I know I kinda just badmouthed this quality of his, but I had just written it so poorly in WSS, so I feel like it needs a redemption. Looking back, I realized I didn't reveal much about Lucas other than the fact that 1, he was the guy that basically knew everyone somehow, 2, he was Callan's online friend, 3, Noah's childhood friend, basically the extrovert that kidnaps the introverts, and 4, he was the first character I ever made who was openly gay, and who was set up to eventually be with Noah, who's bi, just in case you were wondering. But that's also another thing that I couldn't get to work in WSS with Lucas because I've come to realize I'm not good at writing romance. Any attempts I made for Lucas and Noah to get together were met with an awkward wall. I just couldn't get their whole love, drama, confession thing going. Of course, now that WSS is discontinued, those attempts will never see the light of day, so thank God. If anything, almost everything about Lucas was awkward to write, given his circumstances and how I lacked the proper knowledge of said circumstances. That just made Lucas all the more difficult to write as a character because I didn't know myself where to take his character, and more often than not, I was using brute force to try and get situations about Lucas to stick. I had many events involving WSS Lucas planned, but in retrospect, they just didn't fit into the story and there was really no need for Lucas to be the way that he was. And the trauma I so blindly dumped on him was unnecessary and held no real value to his character or the story. So how do I go about fixing these problems? Well, for one, Lucas is engaged now, as in he has a fiancé. To whom, you may ask? Noah. Who else was I supposed to pair with Lucas? No one. Noah is literally the only one for Lucas. Okay, in all seriousness, the reason why I decided to have Lucas and Noah as fiancés already, instead of them starting out as the friends to lover trope, is because they just work better that way. It's less awkward between the two if I have them start out as an engaged couple, Plus, I get to skip out on all the unnecessary romance drama that I had so much trouble trying to get around before. And if you've seen Callan's redesign video, then you'll know that Callan and Lucas no longer have any prior relation to each other in terms of being friends. They are complete strangers to each other now. It's not like video games exist in a fantasy world anyways. Next, I had changed, rather fixed, Lucas's upbringing, one that actually fits the structure of the story and holds relevance to what is happening. In the new story, with as little spoilers as possible, I will say that Lucas and Noah went through some good old trauma together. And what exactly is that trauma? Imagine a gladiator ring maybe, or a situation akin to it. I'm really not willing to say much about it because possible spoilers, but let me just say it's not like what I had done in WSS. They're fine this time around, I promise. Take my word for it, okay? I decided to keep the put others before himself aspect of Lucas because, in truth, I really can't imagine Lucas exhibiting any other behavior. It's in his nature to help out other people. Of course, that's not his only quality, but it's probably his most defining. Or I should say that his caring attitude isn't as frustrating as it was before. Plus, the occupation I chose for Lucas in the new story fits that behavior aspect of him quite well. And that occupation happens to be a quote-unquote merchant. But the truth of the matter is that Lucas is actually a smuggler. Not the bad kind, he's got a good reason for it. And that reason relates to the world building I initially wanted for WSS, but because I had put WSS in a modern era as opposed to a fantasy world, the world building was hard to manipulate and didn't give me the desired effect that I wanted. Essentially, in the new story, it's a humans versus quote-unquote monster situation, and the human race have led this charge of division. And so Lucas, in disagreement with his own race, lends a helping hand to those who have been defined as the monsters in spite of the risks. Besides, he's got a loving fiancé to worry about his reckless butt now, so it's fine. So, with Lucas's new design, he was designed in a way to pass off as a regular old merchant with green as his signature color, merchant bag and lantern included. And for some reason, I swear I had a reason for it but I forgot, is that his design ended up coming out as asymmetrical, which actually suits him well if I'm being honest. I guess Lucas has always been sort of chaotic in a way, so asymmetry was a happy little accident. But even with the asymmetry, he looks a lot more put together. I also intentionally made him look more scraggly, ruffled up. I'm not quite sure how to describe it, but he definitely doesn't care for putting up with appearances. He's a casual guy, I would say. More laid back and not an annoying way. Either way, Lucas definitely feels a lot more realistic than he was in WSS. He's not cringy or overly cheerful as to cover up his poorly written trauma, and he no longer serves the purpose of being the comedic relief. I realized that I exaggerated a lot of things in WSS, and that included some not so good things about Lucas's trauma. And it got to the point where some things in WSS were just unworkable that I could no longer brute force my way through it. Like sometimes when I look back on some pages I drew or chapters that I wrote, I just want to punch myself. I physically recoil at the sight. But it's also gratifying to know that I am improving in my writing skills when I look back on my old work and compare it to what I've written now. Learning from mistakes I've made, learning how to avoid mistakes like those in the future, and taking the time to properly research heavier topics if I ever may include them in the new story. And as much as I am a sucker for angst, I know that I am lacking information on how to properly write certain types of trauma, and WSS Lucas was unfortunate enough to receive the worst of my lack of knowledge. And that's one of the reasons why I began feeling uncomfortable trying to write Lucas in WSS, and that contributed to me discontinuing WSS. Again, thankfully it never got to the point where I had to explicitly show anything, and I'm grateful that it hadn't. But I am glad to say that I love the new Lucas more than I had in WSS. He feels natural, like an actual person. When I think of scenarios Lucas may be involved in, it's a smoother process to write about him in those scenarios now. He no longer feels awkward and frustrating, and I don't need to force certain circumstances onto him. Lucas as a character in the new story flows a lot better. He fits in, like a puzzle piece to a greater image unlike he had in WSS. His presence and character is relevant now. And that's it for Lucas. I would say Lucas has undergone quite the transformation, and I couldn't be happier. I definitely enjoyed redesigning Lucas and desperately fixing up aspects of him that just weren't working in WSS. If you enjoyed watching this redesign video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment what you think of the new and improved Lucas. And of course, Lucas's redesign was posted a while ago alongside most of the rest of the redesigns for the new story on my Instagram and Twitter. I suggest you follow me on those platforms just so you can get early access to my content and to see a lot more activity from me. The link to my socials will just be in the description. In the next redesign video, it will be Eleanor Warren / Pendragon's turn, the third of the original 4 that graced the WSS universe alongside Lucas and Callan. It may be a while before that video comes out, as these narrated videos do take a while to make. And with that, thank you all for keeping me company, make sure to take care of yourselves, and until next time, my little hatchlings, bye!